There's a lot that can be said about the Switch 2's first year. It had some successes, it's had some failures, it's had some controversies, but has it had a successful first year? Because that's what matters, right? Not if it had a better first year than the Switch 1 or PlayStation 5. No, because the Switch 2 is running its own race. When you compare the landscape of the world of today with that of 2017 when the Switch 1 launched, we're in a very different place. The Switch 1 introduced the world to the possibility of true AAA gaming on the go. It wasn't the first handheld, obviously, but it was the first to have graphics on par with what dedicated home consoles provided. Sure, the Vita was a workhorse, but for only a little bit more, the Switch blew it out of the water, and the Switch 1's success showed everyone else just what to do. Give us a device that can play AAA games on the go, and bubbling out from the well of inspiration borderline patent infringement, we have so many handheld devices that can play the latest and greatest games, and that means the Switch 2 launched against a lot of competition the Switch 1 didn't have. Luckily, Nintendo seemed prepared for that because the Switch 2 is a lot more powerful than the Switch 1, and I think it's a lot more powerful than most people thought it would be. When Nintendo first announced the Switch 2, they made a big deal about the higher frame rate screen, the improved resolution. I think we all expected that at a bare minimum. Even having 4K in docked mode isn't that impressive. I mean, it was 2025 after all. 4K has been a thing for over a decade, even if I first got a 4K TV last year. That was a hand-me-down that I needed to fix. Anyway, an upgrade across the board was expected, and they delivered. Bigger screen, better performance, more internal storage. The only thing not improved was the battery life, but you can't have everything, right? But that power has made this a great device for someone looking to play some of the latest and greatest games. The Switch 1 certainly brought third-party studios back to Nintendo. When you sell over 150 million consoles, you're going to attract their attention. And while a lot of great and new games did launch on the Switch 1, like Octopath Traveler, Monster Hunters, Hades, a lot of the great AAA graphically intense games that came to the Switch were older games. You had Skyrim, Doom, Witcher 3, BioShock, Dark Souls. Great games, great AAA games, but ones that came out years and years earlier on older systems. And while the Switch 2 launched with Cyberpunk 2077, an older game, it's also seen a lot of brand new games launching on the console. Just this year, we've gotten Resident Evil 8 and Pragmata. But even having games that come out in the last 3 or 4 years is impressive. These are current-gen, third-party home console games coming out on a Nintendo system. What is this, 2005? We're talking about the Final Fantasy remakes, Indiana Jones, Star Wars Outlaws, Street Fighter 6, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Elden Ring, maybe? This is amazing content for a Nintendo console, and it's all from third-party developers, which is not a typical strength for Nintendo. And the best part is, no, not that they're almost all on GameCube cards, but they're not cloud-based versions. The Switch 1 had a few of these newer, more demanding games, but you had to play them through the cloud, which is just not the best option. But with Switch 2, we're now getting these games playing native on the console, and that's pretty amazing. I mean, even the newest Call of Duty is coming to Switch 2. I might have to buy a Call of Duty game for the first time in decades. When the hell did Modern Warfare 2 come out? No, the one for the 360.
Damn!
It is very encouraging that the Switch 2 is already getting these new games, and I think that's a shift we should celebrate, and credit to the power Nintendo managed to cram into this thing, even if it comes at a cost, which is a lot. I think we can all agree $450 for a Nintendo console is a lot. But I think we can all look at that now and say, yeah, okay, that's not a bad price. We'll take it. It's certainly better than $500, which is what it will cost come September 1st. $500 for a Nintendo console is sad. It's just sad. For a long time, Nintendo's been the cheap home console option, and because of price increases to the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and just last week, even the Steam Deck. By the way, talk about a price increase. But with all of those getting price increases as well, the Nintendo console is still amazingly the cheaper option, but that doesn't mean it's cheap anymore. And that's sad for those looking for a cheap console solution. I remember as a kid, I managed to get a GameCube for Christmas the year it came out because it was only $200 brand new, which, because I know someone's going to say it, accounting for inflation, that's only $375 in today's money. In today's money, that's unfortunately cheap. The Switch was cheap, it undercut everyone on price and sold like hotcakes. Looking back, it was a steal for what it gave us at $300, and because it continued to sell and because of other world events, it just never got a price cut. So it wasn't too big of a shock that the Switch 2 launched at $450. It sort of makes sense, right? They weren't going to price it just above the Switch 1's price. It had to be a significant amount more, and $150 is a significant amount more. And now, a little over a year later, the console is going to cost $500. Price increases have unfortunately become the norm for consoles. Now, I don't want to be accused of being a Nintendo shill, but I will say to their credit, Nintendo has given us all a very big heads up to this price increase. It doesn't take effect until September 1st. That's better than what Sony did, and certainly better than what Valve did, with the Steam Deck being out of stock and then suddenly back in stock, yay, with a new $200 price increase, boo. But even with the looming price increase, it's still cheaper than almost every other option out there. And honestly, looking at what this thing can do, at $450, this feels like a great deal because the power in this thing is both appreciated and really it was needed. The Switch 1 gave us amazing games, and the Switch 2 is giving us even better ones. It's pushing Nintendo graphics further than they've ever been pushed, and it's probably the biggest generational upgrade in performance since the N64 to GameCube. But that performance doesn't just come in the form of great looking games, it also comes in the form of a better overall experience with the console, especially when navigating around the menus. I don't see this talked about enough, and I'm talking especially about the eShop. When you try navigating the eShop on the original Switch, it is painful, it is slow, it is clunky. It would almost be faster to get in your car, drive to the store, buy the game, come home, pop it in, than it would to try scrolling through page after page after page, waiting for it to load. On the Switch 2, this is not a problem. I don't know what they did, if it really is just the extra processing power, but from day one, it was like a night and day difference scrolling through this eShop on the Switch 2. It makes it a good experience. It makes it enjoyable to load up the eShop and see just what crazy sale they have now. I'm not a digital game buyer that much. I like the physical, the collecting, but I'm not a purist either. I have bought some digital games on here, and I'll say, if you're someone who buys a lot of digital games, the improvements to the system on the Switch 2 might honestly be enough to justify the purchase. It really is just that much better. I mean, it never should have been as bad as it was on the Switch 1, but I'm very glad they took the time to figure out how to make this an enjoyable user experience. And it is an enjoyable experience, all of it. If you have a Switch 1, you know what you're getting with the Switch 2. It's bigger, it's more comfortable, it's not perfect. Because it has this thin plastic anti-shatter film on it, my screen has these micro scratches on it. I haven't taken it anywhere. It goes in and out of the dock carefully, and that's it. It's not like the Scratchgate issue of the first Switch, but it is an issue. Obviously, if something like that bothers you, there are screen protectors out there. I can't see it during gameplay, only when I angle it toward light, so it's not that big a deal to me. The Joy-Cons are bigger and better, but still, at the end of the day, they're Joy-Cons. You're going to probably want a better controller when playing docked, or a grip when playing handheld. I did buy the Switch 2 Pro controller, but honestly, there are other cheaper options out there, like this controller 8BitDo sent over, that work just fine with the Switch and Switch 2. It feels great, like most 8BitDo controllers do. Sorry about that. It connects easy enough through Bluetooth, has very little input lag, and it even has its own cute little dock to sit in, which the Pro controllers do not. Sorry again. And because everything else Nintendo got price increases not long after the Switch 2 came out, thanks to market conditions, it's probably a much better deal than the official Pro controller. I'll leave a link down below if anyone wants to check it out. As someone who doesn't have a PS5 or Steam Deck and I have a Mac, this is my only connection to new releases. It's nice to have the ability to play brand new AAA games, even if they are slightly downgraded versions. I don't mind not seeing every strand of hair or dealing with 30 FPS. Those aren't my biggest priorities when it comes to gaming. I just want fun games, fun experiences, and one of the reasons I still gravitate toward Nintendo consoles after all these years is that they deliver what I want. Typically, that comes from their first-party games, which, if I'm being honest, are a little lacking on the Switch 2's first year. Partly because they're falling victim to what happened early on with the PlayStation 5, where a lot of the games coming out are also coming out on the previous generation. For instance, I just finished playing Ragnarok on my PS4 Pro. That's a first-party exclusive that released in November of 2022, 2 years after the PS5 came out, running on last generation's hardware. That would be like Wind Waker coming out on the N64. It's unthinkable. And yet Metroid Prime 4, Pokémon Legends ZA are all regular Switch games with some Switch 2 enhancements. Now, I'm not criticizing Nintendo for doing this, and in some ways it's actually a little consumer friendly while also being self-serving. They get to sell more copies of the games, good for Nintendo, and more people get to play the games without having to upgrade, which is good for consumers. But that does mean there's less incentive to upgrade to a Switch 2 right away. And it means these games, some have been in development for a while, were built with the Switch 1 hardware in mind and not built to take full advantage of the Switch 2. These crossover titles will inevitably phase out as they focus more and more on the Switch 2, but if those are the games you want to play now, I don't think it's worth upgrading just for slightly better frame rates and clarity. Speaking of, Nintendo did recently push out an update of the Switch 2, which gives it this sort of boost mode when playing Switch 1 games. Now, thanks to the higher resolution screen and improved frame rate, the Switch 1 games can actually play at up to 1080p and at higher frame rates when in handheld mode. They basically play how they would when docked, but now in handheld mode. And that's nice to see, and it certainly makes Switch 1 games look and run better on here versus on the Switch 1. Which is how it should be, really. And if you have a lot of Switch 1 games in your backlog, especially games that run a little rough on the Switch, like Tears of the Kingdom, then a Switch 2 is going to be the best way to play those games moving forward, even if you decide not to pay $10 for the Switch 2 upgrade. I will say, again, as a shill, a neat little thing Nintendo's done is that the Switch 2 version of Switch 1 games can actually run on the Switch 1. I recently bought Mario Party Jamboree because the family was looking for something new to play, and yeah, you can just pop this red cartridge into an old Switch and it plays the regular version, no problem. That's really cool, especially for households that have a bunch of original Switches, and then you can still use these games on those. Again, it's not something Nintendo had to do. I don't think I can put the PS5 version of Ragnarok in my PS4 and play it, so props to them for that support. Now, when it comes to the Switch 2 exclusives we've gotten from Nintendo, there just aren't a lot of massive hits, in my opinion. Donkey Kong's a big franchise, but it's not the biggest draw, and while Bonanza was well received, I think it was helped out by the fact that it was one of the first real Switch 2 exclusives. I will say my kids loved playing it even though they barely had any idea what they were doing. Mario Kart World's been far more controversial. I'm glad I bought it with the bundle because I don't think it's worth $80. It's really just not. It's fun, and my kids have really enjoyed it, and I think they like it better than Mario Kart 8, but they're also like 7 and 10. They're not the greatest connoisseurs of video games. They do love driving over the lunch bags and changing outfits or eating some strange food, and my youngest no longer comes in last. She does still come in like 13th or 14th, so I'm not actually sure if that's an improvement, but it's not last. Pokepia's been a hit, but it's not for me. I like Pokemon, but it's just not a game for me. And I'm not including all those games that have Switch 2 updates, free or not, because adding in something that could be DLC or improving the performance doesn't equate to a new game. I doubt a new mode in Jamboree is what's going to convince you to buy a Switch 2. And that's the point of exclusives. They give you a reason to buy a console, and Nintendo's always had the unique advantage of having a ton of great first-party franchises, but right now, a lot of those are missing in action. The only Mario we've gotten is, Mario Galaxy 2, and I guess 1 if you didn't pick up the 3D All-Star Pack. No new Zelda game except for Hyrule Warrior, no Pikmin. I mean, a Zelda remake or remaster of Ocarina seems to be on the horizon, but that's not a new Zelda game. The Switch 2 does have GameCube games, but even that list is very, very short right now. They just announced Star Fox, but again, that's a remake of 64. I think it looks good and I'll probably pick it up, but I really hope it's not like $70. I mean, come on, it has to be 50, max 60. Nintendo is pretty good about pricing their remakes appropriately. If Metroid Prime Remastered was only 40, this should be no more than 50. I'd rather have an original game. I mean, how hard can it be to come up with some new routes using the same mechanics, but I'll take this for now. When you dig into the catalog a bit, there are a lot of great games available on Switch 2, and probably something out there that catches your eye. That doesn't mean it doesn't feel a little barren right now, but I think that mainly stems from the lack of some big players in Nintendo's catalog. The Switch launched with Breath of the Wild, and then less than a year later, Odyssey came out. Zelda and Mario are major system sellers, and they showed just how great the Switch could be. The Switch 2 doesn't have that 1-2 punch, no, not 1-2 switch, to give it that mass appeal yet. But that's okay for now. I think we can trust that Nintendo will have some killer first-party games coming to this thing, and unlike everyone else, they'll only be playable on here. I mean, the GameCube had a similar start. It launched with a Luigi game, not Mario, and Mario didn't make it over until 2002's Sunshine, which had its critics. Same for Wind Waker when it first launched in 2003. Granted, the GameCube is widely regarded as a failure, but it wasn't to me. I had a great time with it. I've also had a great time with the Switch 2 and found a lot of comfort in having this past year. I think if you're at all interested in the Switch 2, if there are games announced that you're interested in, if you're a huge Pokemon fan, you have to buy a Switch 2, right? Like, Pokemon Wind and Waves is coming out eventually. You know there's going to be a new Mario 3D, a Zelda game. They've announced a new Fire Emblem already, and there's going to be more of those franchise staples that only Nintendo can make. Or you just want something to play some of the newer games coming out that are going to come to the Switch 2 as well, then $450 is a good price. Unfortunately, as much as it pains me to say, $450 in today's market, with all that's going on, is not a terrible price. It's a hard pill to swallow, but moving forward, it's going to be even harder to swallow because it's going to be $500, and who knows, it might go up after that. It might go up next year if everything doesn't straighten out with the RAM chips and SSDs and all that stuff. The price could keep going up, which is painful to say, but if something interests you now, it's probably worth it to buy now instead of waiting and having to pay $50 more, because that's a game, that's 2 games maybe. You could pay $500. They have some choose your bundle packs out right now with either Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, or Pokopia. So that's a much better deal than $500 just for the console. Now granted, despite being a day one purchase, I admittedly haven't played it as much as I thought I would. I've been catching up on some PlayStation exclusives and playing my Eye and Thor more than anything, but that's great for retro games. For the big ticket games, the newest games, this thing is great. It's powerful enough to run some of the best looking games coming out right now, and it does that at one of the lowest price points you can get right now. The build quality is exceptional. It feels premium. It feels the way something that's going to soon cost $500 should feel. I don't think you could say that about the Switch 1. That felt cheap, but it was cheap because it came from a company that needed a moonshot to stay alive, and you know what? They stuck the landing. The Switch 2 comes from a company that's got a lot more arrows in their quiver now, and we'll just have to see where they aim it. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about the Switch 2 down in the comments below. Do you have one? Do you love it? Are you gonna pick one up before the price goes up, or do you just hate Nintendo so much you watch this entire video just so you could say, I hate Nintendo so much, they're stupid, and anyone who buys a Switch 2 is an idiot? Yeah, let me know. And whatever you do, have a wonderful rest of your day. Don't forget to subscribe for the children. Just kidding. Do it for the content.